LiSTNR production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. The US has been facing growing scrutiny after it moved warships and thousands of troops into the Caribbean. And as talk of a land invasion of Venezuela and even war crimes grows louder, the Trump administration's still defending the campaign, insisting it's cracking down on drug trafficking. But critics say that's not the whole story.
Well, Venezuela's extremely rich in natural resources, which makes it a strategically important country. Not only does it have the largest known oil reserves on the planet, it also has natural gas, gold, diamonds, iron ore, you name it.
That explainer into the latest between the US and Venezuela is coming up in the second half of this episode. First, it is time for the headlines with Chris Spyrou on Monday, the 8th of December.
Hey Sash, and to you listening. Australians are being warned tough fire conditions are likely to continue throughout December after dozens of homes were destroyed in New South Wales and Tasmania over the weekend. Cooler weather and easing winds has helped firefighters get the upper hand on blazes across New South Wales, with around 60 currently burning, all at advice level. The hardest hit parts over the weekend were on the state's central coast at Coolawong, where 18 properties were lost, and Bulladilla on the mid-north coast, which saw 4 homes destroyed. Thankfully, nobody was hurt.
Yeah, and incredible footage has come out of the disaster zone on the Central Coast, where TikTok personality Michael Drake posted his escape via a boat on Saturday. Now, natural disaster funding has been activated by the state government, with locals affected able to access specialised support, including financial help and rebuilding and recovery assistance. Now, the Premier, Chris Minns, has visited the fireground at Coolawong with a warning we should expect more of this throughout the bushfire season.
The Bureau of Meteorology reported to us that December looks like hot winds coming in from the west, a warmer Pacific Ocean, and as a result, a very challenging bushfire season.
New South Wales wasn't the only state hit by bushfires. Tasmania's east coast saw 14 homes destroyed and 40 more damaged over the weekend at Dolphin Sands. Severe weather is expected again today, with authorities on high alert for conditions to worsen once again.
The Coalition's pushing for an independent review of the Communication Minister's spending after it was revealed she spent almost $100,000 on flights to the US. Now, the Prime Minister is continuing to defend Annika Wells after the revelations during Senate estimates last week that she had spent $94,827 to get herself and 2 staffers to New York, all to spruik our world-first social media ban at the UN.
Now, she was initially meant to be on the Prime Minister's plane in September, but had stayed back to deal with the Optus 000 outage, that outage, Sash, that was linked to 3 deaths, and that's how we got those last-minute flights costing that amount of money. Now, Liberal Senator James Paterson yesterday said it should be referred to the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority for a thorough review.
It just doesn't pass the kitchen table tests, and a lot of Australians who are struggling right now with their electricity bills and other expenses won't think a minister who's very well paid really needs to be taking these trips at taxpayers' expense.
Now, Wells is defending the trip, saying while the price tag would surprise the average Australian, to say the least, Chris, she says speaking about the social media ban was important and the spend was within guidelines, a line the Prime Minister also took yesterday.
Annika Wells was, of course, doing her job as the Communications Minister who's in charge of this world-leading legislation. And the comments that were heard afterwards were, I've been to lots of forums at the United Nations. This is the first time I've been to a forum that has changed my mind.
So this isn't the first time either, Chris, that Wells has kind of faced scrutiny for her travel. She is also the sports minister, and her travel in that capacity included 3 trips to Paris in 12 months for the Rugby World Cup, plus the Paris Olympics and the Paralympics, all which cost $116,000.
Yeah.
She also spent around $3,000 on flights and allowances for her husband and kids to join her in Thredbo in 2024 while she was there for meetings. Now, she's acknowledged her family did go skiing, but she says she was there for work and the trip was within the family reunion and travel guidelines. So Annika Wells, by the letter of the law of Parliament and what our politicians can spend money on, She says she's done it by the book, which is, fair enough. But yeah, James Patterson's point, and I like how he used the term doesn't pass the kitchen table test. We're not saying the pub test anymore.
Not saying the pub test anymore. We've
it's the
cancelled
kitchen
that.
table. We're talking around the kitchen table, and I think most Aussies would go, how on earth did those flights cost $95,000?
Yeah, well, apparently it was all booked hours before she actually boarded the flight, and because it's UN week in the New York, things are just jacked up anyway. Interestingly, though, we've seen this before. We've seen it in 2012 with now Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke. He took a work trip to Uluru and claimed $12,000 so his family could join him. Those were also within the rules, but at the time, because it came under so much scrutiny, he actually repaid a significant amount of that back. So it'll be very interesting to see if that happens here this time around. Albo's defending it, Annika Wells is defending it. Let's see what'll happen this week.
Overseas now, and a rare visit to Chernobyl has revealed radiation at the site is no longer being contained effectively. Inspectors from the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency have inspected the protective structure that surrounds the exploded reactor, finding it was damaged in a February strike on Ukraine by Russia. In a report just issued, the IAEA has warned the shield can no longer do its job to confine radioactive waste.
Yeah, the watchdog has recommended a major renovation of the steel structure with limited temporary repairs, not enough to keep the radiation in. Chernobyl's number 4 reactor exploded on April 26, 1986, with the radiation levels from the disaster so dangerous that the area won't be habitable again for at least 20,000 years. Birth defects and cancer rates among residents in the areas exposed to radiation are still really high, Sash.
Yeah, and this structure that has been damaged is considered this monumental engineering feat. It took 9 years to build. They put it in place in 2019. And it is the world's largest movable land structure and designed to last 100 years. It cost $3.6 billion Australian dollars to build, and that came from funding from 45 donor countries. Now, full restoration of the structure is expected to happen, but not until the conflict between Russia and Ukraine ends.
To Melbourne now, where around 600 people have called for Australia to boycott the Eurovision Song Contest next year over Israel's continued involvement. The protesters took to SBS's headquarters in Fed Square as part of broader pro-Palestine rallies on Sunday, with Australia's 2020 and 2021 entrant Montaigne among those who attended and led chants.
Yeah, wow. Big turnout there outside SBS's headquarters, Chris. And this is all kicked off after 4 countries withdrew from next year's competition in Austria when the organisers of Eurovision cleared Israel to compete last week. Spain, the Netherlands, Ireland and Slovenia say they won't be competing, citing the humanitarian toll of the war in Gaza and accusations of unfair voting practices.
And a cheeky little spoiler alert for any F1 fans. We are going to read out some results in a moment. You have time to leave.
You've been warned.
You have been warned.
Get off.
Okay, we're playing some audio now.
It's Lando Norris who takes his first World Championship in 2025. It's the promised land for Lando.
Yes, after a dramatic season full of tense rivalries, Lando Norris has pipped our man Oscar Piastri to claim his first Formula One World Championship.
Thank you, guys. Oh my God. You made a kid's dream true. Thank you so much.
That was the Brit finishing in 3rd place at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Max Verstappen won the race while Piastri came in 2nd.
To even be able to get to that point is a pretty cool feeling to have.
So Piastri ended the season in 3rd spot behind his often bitter rival, who happens to be on the same team as him at McLaren. Now, apparently, they all go into this room post-race before the podium, and it was allegedly very, very frosty after Norris and Piastri spent most of the season at loggerheads. Now, if you need a reminder of why, we did do a beefing episode on their rivalry, and we'll pop that in the show notes. Now, before we go, we actually have something new to talk to you about. We would like you to fill in a survey because we want to bring you a bigger, better briefing next year that is all about what you want to hear and the stories that you want us to cover. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
And I mean, guys, there is a $100 gift card card up for grabs. I mean, as much as I want to hear your feedback, I also want you to win this gift card. The link to that will be in our show notes. That is the only place you will find that link. We'll pop that in every show notes for every episode that comes out over the next few weeks. Have a look at it. It's only going to take you, I have it on good word, it'll take you a few minutes.
Yeah.
I haven't tried it myself yet, but a few minutes. So definitely hop into the show notes and have a crack at filling that out for us.
Yep, and we will be drawing the winner from that early next year as well. So make sure you keep listening. Okay, that is it for the headlines. Next up, we are getting into what is going on in the Caribbean with the US. Is it about to invade Venezuela? Chris, you have all the details for us. Have a listen to that up next.
The world's mightiest military has moved 15,000 troops and around a dozen warships to the Caribbean, putting them within striking distance of one of Latin America's most troubled and vulnerable nations. And if you've seen the headlines and videos about the US and Venezuela but don't know how we got here, let's start in September. That's when Donald Trump ordered a strike on a small boat in the southern Caribbean. All 11 people on board were killed, and these are people the US government described, without providing any evidence, as criminals from Venezuela who were attempting to smuggle drugs into the States.
We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time, coming out very heavily from Venezuela. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela, so we took it out, and you'll get to see that.
This marked a major escalation in the US government's so-called war on narco-terrorists, with the footage making global headlines. And those headlines really haven't stopped. At least 20 more boats have been hit since September, and some 70 more people killed as the US continues its airstrikes, strikes that the UN has described as unlawful.
The UN High Commissioner for Refugees has been clear that international law is not compatible with this kind of strikes.
Fast forward to October, that's when we found out a covert CIA operation in Venezuela had been greenlit, with Trump at the time having this to say.
Well, I don't want to tell you exactly, but we are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control. And the way you look at it is every boat that we knock out, we save 25,000 American lives.
Since then, the UK has stopped sharing intelligence on boat movements with the US, and a war of words has erupted between Trump and Nicolas Maduro. Nicolas Maduro being Venezuela's authoritarian leader who the US last month formally accused of being the head of a foreign terrorist group.
Nicolas Maduro and his gang is officially a terrorist organization, and he is the head of a terrorist organization, which according to our United States laws puts him right in the crosshairs. We can take him out, extradite him, and we can go in and try to finish his regime. So good news for the Venezuelans who have been waiting for years to be liberated, and very good news for the American economy.
Now, all of this raises a whole bunch of questions, but let's start with the strikes in international waters.
The boats get hit, and you see that fentanyl all over the ocean. It's like floating in bags. It's all over the place.
The initial attack that killed 11 people on September 2 is back in the spotlight, and that's after it was confirmed last week the US Navy carried out a double tap strike, which basically means they shot at that boat twice. According to the Washington Post, 9 people were killed in the first strike, while the 2 survivors left clinging to debris in the water were killed in the second. The White House has defended it, saying it was an act of self-defense, while some US politicians, former officers and experts say it could amount to a war crime.
If those were, in fact, people with whom the United States is at war with, as the Trump administration claims, then the second strike is a blatant violation of the law of armed conflict. You are supposed to leave survivors and not give no quarter. If we are not, in fact, at war, then this is simply like every other strike that has killed now over 80 people, simply a criminal act of murder.
That was Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Spencer Ackerman there. And that brings us to our next question. Is this all just about drugs?
Drug trafficking includes not only the routes themselves, but also directly tied to the Venezuelan government and the Maduro circle by way of the Cartel de los Soles. Is there a bit of truth to it? Sure. Chris, I grew up in Maracaibo, Venezuela's second largest city. As a little kid, I needed to be aware of that underbelly. Having said that, does that mean that A is of the kind of impact or magnitude that the Trump administration alleges? Well, that's a bit more controversial.
That's Professor Raul Sanchez-Urribarri, a Venezuelan Australian who's an associate dean at La Trobe Uni, speaking with me there. Now, according to counter-narcotic experts, Venezuela does act as a transit country, but it's a minor player in global drug trafficking. When it comes to drugs like cocaine, its neighbour Colombia, the world's largest producer of it, mostly smuggles it to the US through the Pacific, not via fast boats in the Caribbean. And as for fentanyl, when we look at Washington's latest drug threat assessment, that's produced mostly in Mexico and reaches the states almost exclusively via land through its southern border. So while drugs form part of the picture, it's not the whole story. Joining me now is LiSTNR's senior investigative journalist, Claudianna Blanco. Claudes, welcome back to The Briefing. Beyond drugs, why else is the US interested in Venezuela?
Well, Venezuela is extremely rich in natural resources, which makes it a strategically important country and explains much of the international attention it receives. Not only does it have the largest known oil reserves on the planet, it also has natural gas, gold, diamonds, iron ore, you name it. Having access to that natural wealth is extremely valuable to any industrialized nation, let alone the United States, which is, practically next door.
Yeah.
But also, historically, the U.S. has been Venezuela's largest and most important buyer of oil. But in the late 1990s, the relationship between Venezuela and the United States began to sour after the late President Hugo Chavez came to power. So Chavez was Venezuela's populist leftist leader. He was anti-President Bush, and he turned to some of the U.S.'s most notorious enemies, countries like Russia, China, Cuba, and Iran, and forged really deep alliances. And after he died, those relationships with U.S. enemies were continued by his successor, Nicolás Maduro. And also, Venezuela has also had a lot of political influence in Latin America and the Caribbean. Think the pink socialist wave in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Ecuador in the early 2000s, which is something that the U.S. obviously did not appreciate. And over the years, there's also been rumors and mounting evidence indicating that Venezuela has been a safe haven for international guerrilla groups. So those, on top of our local criminal gangs, have made the country way more dangerous and volatile.
So there's a few more factors at play beyond crime here or drug trafficking. We're talking oil resources and political influence that I'm not sure a lot of people would have known. When we're talking about the US's operations here, they've taken a bit of a multifaceted approach. It extends beyond the strikes. There's a CIA operation, there's threats of a ground invasion. Trump's announced that the airspace above Venezuela is closed. The Maduro administration has pushed back on multiple occasions. Maduro himself labelled the threats and the activity illegal, which Raul has some thoughts on.
It's extremely concerning from the point of view of international law what's happening. As a Venezuelan, I also find it rich that Nicolás Maduro invokes that. I'm sorry for saying it that crudely, but it's a government that has been at odds with humanitarian law over and over. So we have to bear that in mind too.
Can you explain that a little bit further?
Yeah. I mean, here, two negatives don't cancel each other out. So the U.S. striking boats in international waters and killing people without evidence is extremely concerning indeed. And historically, CIA operations as well as U.S. interventions in the region have been significantly damaging for the most part. But on the other hand, UN investigators and other human rights organizations have found the Maduro government responsible for systemic and widespread human rights abuses, from forced disappearances to arbitrary detention, torture, and sexual abuse of political dissidents. And the Venezuelan capital is now home to what human rights defenders have identified as the largest torture center in Latin America.
Based on how you've described the running of the country, are there people in Venezuela at the moment that are welcoming a quote-unquote invasion or the possibility of a US invasion?
A significant number of Venezuelans say they do support regime change after years of what they described as rigged or stolen elections, failed democratic attempts, and violently crushed protests. Many people on the ground are so desperate, they're even willing to contemplate a U.S. intervention, not because they want a war, not because they want an invasion, but because they see no other path to change. And we're talking about decades of food shortages, mismanagement, corruption and runaway inflation. Like, it's really rough. The issue here is the cost to the people.
Yeah.
We talk about this because Trump is involved.
Yeah.
But I think it's really unfair that that's the reason why we're talking about it and not because there are these people, my countrymen and women, who are stuck under international interests. So welcoming an intervention just underscores just how desperate the situation has become. And the day-to-day reality is such that there's no fear of the unknown. They tell me things like, let's get the regime out, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, wow. Well, speaking of the invasion, the threat of an invasion, Republican Congresswoman Maria Salazar said that a U.S. invasion would be very similar to that of Panama in 1989. The U.S. effectively would go in, go out, topple the regime in a few days or weeks, and the locals would celebrate. They'd share drinks, they'd party. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first off, we'd have to ask the Panamanian people if they agree with that. Secondly, we have to consider that there will be groups, military, militias, or paramilitary, that will likely defend the regime, although most analysts do say that most would surrender. But many in the population, I have no doubt, will celebrate, as there are hopes to rebuild the country. Many of the 9 million Venezuelans who fled the country in the last decade have said that they would return. Like, I personally know people who can't wait to pack their bags because they really want to be part of rebuilding the country, which is what the opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado has promised to do if Trump deposes Maduro. So the promise is we're going to fix the country and you're going to get to come back and rebuild.
That was LiSTNR senior investigative journalist Claudianna Blanco speaking with me there. And that is it for this episode of The Briefing. If you learned something new in this episode, why not flick it over to a mate? And while you're there, leave us a rate and a review. I'm Spyrou. I'll catch you next time.